What would you give up if the person you loved could no longer breathe? 10-year-old Clara entered a snowy pharmacy, carrying $43, and Sunny, the puppy she loved most. When the medicine cost more than she had, she asked the pharmacist to keep Sunny until her mother recovered. Officer Declan Harrow heard every word, while his canine Huxley quietly lowered himself beside the trembling puppy. That moment would lead them through illness, a poisoned motel, and a winter night that tested what it truly means to stay. But the greatest rescue was teaching a frightened child that love should never have to be traded for safety. Tell us where you're watching from, and please like, share, and subscribe for more heartfelt canine stories. Silverpine looked almost unreal beneath the afternoon snow. Fresh white powder softened the steep roofs along Main Street, hiding cracked shingles and old gutters beneath a clean, shining layer. Volunteers stood on ladders, stringing colored lights between lampposts, while wooden booths for the upcoming Snow Lantern Festival crowded the town square. Cinnamon drifted from a bakery cart. Hot chocolate steamed beneath a red awning. Somewhere near the courthouse, a violinist practiced the same 6 notes again and again. The town seemed determined to be cheerful. Clara Bellamy walked through it without looking up. Her mustard-yellow coat had once belonged to someone larger. The sleeves hung beyond her wrists, forcing her to curl her fingers inside the cuffs. Melted snow had darkened the toes of her plum-colored boots, and cold water pressed through one damaged seam every time she stepped. She held Sunny beneath the front of her coat. The 4-month-old golden retriever was small enough to fit against her ribs, though his oversized paws dangled awkwardly. His honey-colored fur was damp around the ears, and the little white crescent beneath his chin appeared whenever he lifted his head to sniff the winter air. "Almost there," Clara whispered. Sunny licked the edge of her chin. She had repeated those words for 6 blocks. Almost there, almost back, almost enough. Her mother had folded the prescription twice before placing it in Clara's pocket. Elise had also given her $43 in cash, every bill flattened carefully against the motel table as though neatness might make the amount larger. "Go straight to Mason Vapine," her mother had said between coughs. "The medicine is already waiting. Don't stop anywhere. Come straight back." Clara had promised. She had not told Elise that her breathing sounded worse than it had the night before. Mason Vapine Pharmacy stood at the corner of Main and Alder, its front window framed with paper snowflakes and strings of tiny white bulbs. Clara pushed through the door with her shoulder. A brass bell chimed above her, and warm air carrying the scent of menthol, cardboard, and coffee rushed over her face. Sunny wriggled inside her coat. "Stay," Clara murmured. The pharmacy was quiet. An elderly man examined greeting cards near the entrance. A woman in a red scarf waited beside the consultation window. Behind the main counter, pharmacist Graham Pritchard looked up from a computer screen. Graham was in his late 50s, with thinning silver hair, wire-framed glasses, and the rounded shoulders of a man who had spent decades leaning over prescription labels. He recognized the name on the paper before Clara finished unfolding it. "Elise Bellamy?" Clara nodded. "My mom called." She did. He turned toward a white paper bag resting beside the register, then he hesitated. Clara noticed. Adults often believed children did not see hesitation. They softened their voices, glanced at one another, and paused before delivering bad news. Clara had learned to read those pauses long before she understood the words that followed them. Graham returned to the screen and typed something. "Did your mother give you an insurance card?" She said it was already in the computer. It was. He removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "But the policy isn't active anymore." Clara stared at him. "The price changed," Graham continued gently. "The antibiotic and the inhaler together come to $126. The figure meant nothing for half a second. Then it meant everything. Clara reached into her coat and took out the folded bills. She placed them on the counter, smoothing each one with her palm. 2 20s, 3 1s. There's more. She searched the right pocket and found 74 cents. In the other pocket were 2 crumpled dollar bills she had hidden from her mother. They had been saved for Sonny's food. Clara added them to the pile. Graham looked down at the money and then toward the prescription bag. "I'm sorry. You didn't count the coins." "I did. There's 74 cents. I know." Clara counted everything again anyway. Sonny pushed his nose through the open front of her coat, his ears, darker than the rest of his fur, folded forward as he sniffed the counter. "My mom needs both," Clara said. Graham lowered his voice. "The antibiotic is important, but with her asthma, the inhaler may be even more urgent." "Then give me that one first." "The inhaler alone is more than you have." Clara looked at the paper bag behind him. It was close enough that she could read the first 3 letters of her mother's name printed on the label, Eli. She imagined returning to the motel without it. She imagined Elise trying to smile and saying they would figure something out in the morning. She imagined the sound of her mother coughing in the darkness, one hand pressed against her chest, the other reaching blindly for the empty inhaler on the nightstand. Clara's left hand disappeared into her sleeve. On the inside of her wrist, written in blue ink, were 3 times, 828. The medicine schedule Elise had made her memorize. The next time was already late. "I can work," Clara said. Graham's expression tightened. "Sweetheart, I can sweep or put things on shelves. I know how to read labels." "You're too young to work here." "I can shovel the sidewalk. I can't employ a 10-year-old. I don't need to be employed." Her voice remained controlled, which somehow made Graham look more troubled. Clara glanced down at Sonny. The puppy had been a gift from her grandmother 6 weeks before she died. At the time, Sonny had been a warm, round-bellied bundle that slept against Clara's neck. Her grandmother had said every frightened child deserved something that believed the world was safe. Clara no longer believed that. Sonny lived it. She lifted him from inside her coat and placed him carefully on the counter. His paws slid slightly on the polished surface. The little brass sun hanging from his plaid collar tapped against the wood. Graham stared at the puppy. Clara kept one hand on Sonny's back. "I'm not selling him," she said quickly. "You can keep him here until my mom gets better. Then I'll come back and pay." Sonny turned toward her and wagged his whole body. "You can feed him from the money I bring. He doesn't eat much yet. He likes people, and he doesn't bite unless he thinks your shoelaces are moving. Clara, I'll come every day after school, or before school. I can clean until it's paid." Behind her, a German shepherd stopped moving. Officer Declan Harrow had entered the pharmacy several minutes earlier with his K9 partner at his left side. He had come to collect a veterinary prescription for Huxley's stiffening rear joints, expecting the errand to take less than 5 minutes. Declan had heard enough difficult conversations in 40 years of life to know when stepping in too early could turn help into humiliation. So he had waited. Tall and athletic beneath his fitted navy uniform, Declan carried authority without needing to display it. His face was long and angular, with a slightly crooked nose and blue-gray eyes that rarely missed movement. A narrow silver streak showed behind his right temple. The dark stubble along his jaw was trimmed close, and the scratched black watch on his wrist had stopped reflecting light years ago. Beside him, Huxley stood with ears raised. The 5-year-old German shepherd was black and deep tan, with a muscular chest and a dark saddle that narrowed into a pine-shaped point along his left side. His right ear tipped outward slightly when he relaxed, though there was nothing relaxed in the way he watched Clara's hand grip the puppy's fur. Declan had seen desperation shout. He had seen it threaten, bargain, and lie. Clara's desperation was different. It had organized the money into straight lines. It had memorized medication times. It had made room for the possibility that saving her mother might require surrendering the one creature she loved without condition. That frightened him more than tears would have. Graham finally noticed the uniform. His eyes met Declan's with silent relief. Declan walked forward, but he did not reach for the prescription or the money. "What's his name?" he asked. Clara turned sharply. Her first reaction was not comfort, it was caution. "Sonny." Declan nodded toward the brass tag. "Fits him. He belongs to me. I can see that. You can't take him. I'm not here to take him." Huxley remained half a step behind Declan, wearing a black tactical harness marked K9 in white letters. His amber-brown eyes stayed on Sonny, focused but calm. Clara pulled the puppy closer. Declan looked at Graham, filled both prescriptions. Graham hesitated only long enough to understand. "Of course, I'll pay." Clara's face hardened. "No." The answer was immediate enough to surprise him. Declan looked back at her. "Your mother needs the medicine." "I know." "Then let me cover it. We can't owe the police." The words were too deliberate to have been invented in that moment. Declan felt something shift behind his ribs. This isn't a police loan. Then what is it? He could have said charity, kindness, help. All three words would have sounded dangerous to a child already measuring what every kindness might cost. "It's a problem I can solve today," he said. "That's all." Clara stared at him, searching for the hidden condition. Declan placed his card on the counter. "Add a thermometer," he told Graham. "Electrolyte solution, something easy to eat, and a towel for the puppy." "We have towels at the motel," Clara said. "A dry one?" She lowered her eyes. Graham began gathering the items. Declan did not ask the total. He knew Clara was watching, and he did not want the number to become another weight she carried. Huxley moved before Declan gave a command. "Not forward, down." The German shepherd folded his front legs and lowered himself slowly onto the pharmacy floor, turning his head slightly away from Sonny. The posture made his broad body appear less threatening. Sonny peered over the edge of the counter. His tail moved once, then again. Clara's fingers tightened around him. "You don't have to," Declan said quietly. She seemed unsure whether he meant the money, the puppy, or the way she was holding herself together. Sonny stretched one paw toward the edge. Clara lifted him down. The puppy stood on the floor for a moment, trembling from cold and uncertainty. Huxley did not move. Sonny took 2 cautious steps, sniffed the German shepherd's muzzle, and immediately ducked beneath the larger dog's neck. Huxley lowered his chin over Sonny's back. The gesture was simple, almost ordinary. Clara broke. Her shoulders folded inward as though someone had finally removed the pins holding them in place. She covered her mouth, but the first sob escaped anyway. Then another came, deeper and rougher, carrying fear that had been stored far longer than the 6-block walk. Declan crouched a few feet away. He did not touch her. He waited until she could breathe. "My mom can't be alone long," Clara said through tears. "Where is she?" Clara wiped her face with the end of her sleeve. "North Star Motor Lodge." "Which room?" "The last one on the upper walkway. 28. "Is anyone with her?" Clara shook her head. Declan's calm expression did not change, but his voice became more precise. "How long has she been having trouble breathing?" "Since 4 yesterday, maybe longer." "Can she stand?" "She says she can." "That isn't what I asked." Clara looked toward the floor. "Not for very long." Declan rose and pressed the radio microphone near his shoulder. "Low, Harrow. What's your location?" A woman's voice answered through a burst of static. 2 blocks east of Maine. "I need transport for a child and a puppy from Mason Vapine to North Star Motor Lodge. No emergency response. Come inside when you arrive." "Copy. 2 minutes." Clara looked frightened again. "Why another officer?" "Huxley rides in a separate K9 compartment. You and Sonny need a regular back seat with proper restraints." "You're coming too?" "Yes." Graham placed the filled prescription and other supplies into 2 paper bags. Declan gave the lighter one to Clara and carried the other himself. The pharmacy door opened a moment later. Officer Maren Lowe entered with snow dusting the shoulders of her navy winter jacket. She was 42, tall and solidly built, with dark brown skin, closely cropped natural curls, and silver-framed glasses that caught the light when she assessed the room. Her gaze moved from Declan to Clara, then to Sonny hiding beneath Huxley. Maren did not ask for an explanation in front of the child. "Car's warm," she said. "Back seat is clear." Clara picked up Sonny. Before tucking him beneath her coat, she touched the top of Huxley's head with 2 fingers. The German shepherd remained still. Declan held the pharmacy door open. Outside, Silverpine continued preparing for celebration. Lantern frames swayed above the square. Someone laughed near the cocoa booth. Snowflakes drifted through strings of colored light. Clara climbed into Marin's patrol car, with Sonny wrapped in the new towel. She held the bag of medicine upright against her chest. Declan watched until Marin secured the door. Then he led Huxley toward the K9 vehicle parked at the curb. 6 blocks separated the pharmacy from North Star Motor Lodge. It should have been an ordinary drive. Yet as the 2 police vehicles pulled away from the bright storefront, Declan could not stop thinking about the small brass sun tapping against the counter, and the steady voice of a child offering to leave behind the only thing she still trusted. He had paid for medicine. Somewhere beneath that simple act, he already sensed a far greater responsibility beginning to take shape. North Star Motor Lodge sat beyond the last row of decorated storefronts, where Silverpeen's festival lights gave way to utility poles and snowbanks hardened by road salt. The motel had been built in a different winter economy, back when families drove north with skis tied to their roofs and stayed for an entire week. Now half the neon letters in the sign were dark. The outdoor walkways sagged slightly between iron supports, and faded blue doors lined both levels beneath railings crusted with snow. Officer Marin Lowe pulled her patrol car beneath the overhang near the office. Clara had spoken only twice during the drive. The first time was to tell Marin that Sonny became carsick if he could not see out a window. The second was to ask whether Declan had changed his mind about coming. "He's right behind us," Marin had said. Clara had turned to look through the rear glass anyway. Now she climbed from the car with the pharmacy bag held against her chest. Sonny was wrapped in the new towel, his round head poking out beneath her chin. Declan parked the K9 vehicle several spaces away. Before opening Huxley's compartment, he studied the building. No one appeared to be watching the upper walkway, though curtains shifted behind one window. An extension cord ran beneath the office door and disappeared around the corner. Snow had been cleared from the central stairs, but not from the emergency staircase at the rear. 2 outdoor lights flickered despite the afternoon brightness. Huxley jumped down carefully. His rear legs landed a fraction more slowly than his front ones. Declan noticed. He always noticed now. Marin joined him beside the stairs. "Room 28, last door on the upper level. Office know we're here?" Clerk saw the uniform and stopped asking questions. "That isn't the same thing." "No, but the child wants to get the medicine upstairs." Clara was already waiting at the first step. Declan did not correct Marin. The building could wait 30 seconds. They climbed together, Huxley moving beside Declan, while Sonny watched him from Clara's arms. Wind pushed fine snow through the open sides of the walkway. Somewhere beneath the floor, machinery rattled in an uneven rhythm, stopped, and then began again with a metallic shudder. Room 28 stood at the far end. Clara knocked twice. "Mom?" No answer. She knocked again, harder. "Mom, I got it." A muffled cough came from inside, followed by something scraping against furniture. Clara reached beneath her coat for a key attached to a blue yarn bracelet. Her fingers shook too badly to guide it into the lock. Marin took one step forward, then stopped herself. Clara tried again. The door opened 3 inches before striking a canvas bag on the floor. Warm, stale air moved into the walkway. The room was small enough that Declan understood its entire shape from the threshold. A double bed stood beneath the window. 2 duffel bags had been pushed against the wall beside a stack of school books. 4 cups of instant noodles sat on top of a microwave. A damp wool coat hung from the back of a chair. On the narrow table near the bed stood a paper birthday cake. It had been made from a cereal box covered in white notebook paper. Crayon candles rose from the top, each flame colored in orange and yellow. A careful line of blue letters read, "Happy Birthday, Mom." Elise Bellamy was trying to stand. She had one hand against the wall and the other pressed to her chest. At 36, she should have looked young beside Declan, but illness had pulled the color from her face and sharpened the bones beneath her skin. Her chestnut hair, naturally wavy, clung damply to her temples. The faded blue sweatshirt she wore hung loose across her shoulders. Her hazel eyes moved first to Clara, then to the pharmacy bag. Then she saw the uniforms. Fear arrived before gratitude could. "What happened?" Clara hurried inside. Nothing bad. Elise pushed away from the wall, her knees buckled. Declan reached her before she hit the floor, catching her by the upper arms and guiding her onto the edge of the bed. She immediately tried to pull away. "I'm fine. You almost fell." I stood up too quickly. Her breath came in short, uneven pulls. A faint whistle followed each exhale. Marin remained near the door, leaving the room as open as possible. Huxley stayed outside the threshold under a quiet hand signal from Declan. Elise looked towards Sonny. "You didn't leave him?" "No." Clara placed the puppy beside her on the bed. Officer Harrow paid. Elise's face changed. Not relief, alarm. "Paid for what?" "The medicine, both of them." Elise turned toward Declan. "I didn't authorize that. I know. Clara shouldn't have involved you. She asked a pharmacist for help. I happened to be there. She was supposed to pick up a prescription and come straight back. She did." The answer stopped Elise for a moment. Declan set the second pharmacy bag on the table, careful not to disturb the paper cake. "The insurance policy on file wasn't active," he said. "The price was higher than you expected." Elise closed her eyes. That explanation seemed to wound her more deeply than a direct accusation would have. "I was told it ran through the end of the month. Apparently it didn't. I can repay you. That isn't the immediate problem." Her eyes opened again. "Then what is?" Declan looked at the effort required for her to remain upright. "You're breathing. I have asthma and a prescription for antibiotics. A clinic spoke to me by video this morning." "What did they say?" "That I probably have pneumonia. They sent the medicine. That was the treatment." "Did they recommend an in-person examination?" Elise did not answer. Clara stood beside the bed with Sonny in her arms. Her gaze moved between the adults as if she were tracking a ball no one else could see. Declan lowered his voice. "I'd like to call an ambulance." "No." The refusal came before he finished the sentence. "Elise, no hospital. You're having difficulty breathing while sitting still. The medicine hasn't had time to work. You nearly collapsed." I said no. The room seemed to shrink around the word. Outside, Huxley shifted his weight but remained in place, his right ear angled toward Declan's voice. Elise pulled Clara closer with one arm. The movement cost her another coughing fit. She bent forward, covering her mouth with her sleeve, each cough dragging painfully through her chest. Clara rubbed her back. Not like a child imitating comfort. Like someone who had done it many times. When Elise could speak again, her voice was rougher. "A woman I knew went into the hospital for 4 days. She lost her room at the shelter while she was there. Her son was placed with strangers in another county. It took her months to get him back." Marin's expression softened, but her posture remained professional. "Elise," she said, "hospitalization alone doesn't cause a parent to lose custody. You weren't there." "No, I wasn't. The caseworker said it was temporary. Temporary became 6 months." Declan understood then that Elise was not refusing care because she failed to grasp the danger. She was refusing because the danger she feared had a different name. He had seen people resist officers for pride, confusion, or anger. This was none of those. Elise was guarding the boundary around her child with what little strength she still possessed. Declan took a chair from the table and placed it several feet from the bed. He sat rather than crouching, keeping his hands visible. "I won't tell you nothing can happen," he said. "That would be dishonest." Elise watched him carefully. "But poverty is not neglect. Living in a motel is not neglect. Needing medical care is not neglect. You can't promise they won't take her." "No." Clara's fingers tightened around Sonny. Declan continued before fear could fill the silence. "I can promise that no one here is going to make decisions in secret. If you become unconscious, confused, or unable to care for Clara, we are required to make a safety plan. That does not automatically mean placing her with strangers. It means identifying who can stay with her, where she can sleep, and how she can remain connected to you. We don't have anyone." The sentence slipped from Elise more quietly than the others. Clara looked down. Declan glanced at Marin. Marin understood the question in his expression. "We have a community medical responder on duty," she said. "Kara Vaughn. She can assess Elise here before anyone decides the next step." Elise gave a tired, humorless laugh. And if she says hospital, then she explains why, Marin replied. You still make decisions unless your condition leaves you unable to do so. Declan did not add pressure. He waited. The paper candles on the false birthday cake leaned slightly toward the heater vent. One had been repaired with transparent tape. Elise stared at it. Then she looked at Clara. Did you eat anything? Clara hesitated. At lunch. It was nearly 4 in the afternoon. Elise closed her eyes for several seconds. When she opened them, some part of the fight had changed shape. Call the responder, she whispered. Not an ambulance. Not yet. Marin stepped onto the walkway to make the call. Declan remained seated while Clara opened the pharmacy bag. She lined the antibiotic, inhaler, and electrolyte bottle on the table in a precise row. Beside them, she placed the handwritten schedule from her wrist onto a scrap of motel stationery. The paper cake stood behind the medicine like a promise made by someone too young to understand how fragile promises could be. Cara Vaughn arrived 20 minutes later, carrying a dark red medical backpack. She was a compact woman of 37, with straight black hair tucked behind her ears and the brisk, focused manner of someone accustomed to entering frightened households without increasing the fear. Her navy medical jacket carried the county health emblem rather than a hospital logo. She introduced herself to Elise first, then asked permission before opening the backpack. No one had to tell Clara to move aside. She gathered Sonny and sat at the foot of the bed, watching every instrument Cara removed. Cara checked Elise's temperature, pulse, and blood pressure. She clipped an orange-cased pulse oximeter onto Elise's finger and waited through several slow breaths. 981, she said. Elise looked toward Declan as if the number belonged to his argument. Kira noticed. The machine isn't taking sides. Clara almost smiled. Cara asked Elise to speak a full sentence without pausing for breath. Elise managed 8 words before stopping. Cara listened to her lungs, then asked about asthma history, fever, fluid intake, and the video appointment. The clinician treated to suspected pneumonia, Cara said. That was reasonable based on what you described. But your oxygen level is lower than I'm comfortable with, and your breathing is working too hard. Do I have to go? I strongly recommend it. Do I have to? Cara removed the stethoscope from her ears. At this moment, you understand where you are, what I'm telling you, and what could happen if you stay. You can refuse transport. But I need you to hear the risks without softening them. Elise nodded. Your oxygen could drop further. You could become confused, faint, or stop responding. The antibiotics will not work instantly. Your asthma makes the next several hours less predictable. Clara stared at the inhaler on the table. Elise's eyes filled, but she did not look away. If I go tomorrow morning, that is safer than not going at all. It is not as safe as going now. The honesty seemed to matter. Elise agreed to use the prescribed inhaler as directed, begin the antibiotic immediately, drink measured amounts of electrolyte solution, and keep her phone within reach. Kira arranged an appointment at the county's free clinic for 8 the next morning and entered a priority note in the system. She also left clear instructions for Clara. If your mom cannot answer a simple question, if her lips look gray or blue, or if she cannot stand even with help, you call emergency services. Not Officer Harrow first, emergency services first. Clara nodded solemnly. Elise looked at her daughter and then toward Declan. No, she said softly. She calls emergency services, and then she calls you. It was not trust exactly, but it was no longer refusal. Cara documented Elise's decision and had her sign the refusal of transport form. Declan did not stand over her while she signed. He remained by the window, looking out at snow collecting along the railing. Marin returned after contacting Maribel Sloan, a county family support specialist. Maribel would call Elise that evening to begin a voluntary safety plan and identify emergency caregiving options. She would not arrive with an investigator or remove Clara without cause. Before leaving, Marin checked the lock and found the strike plate loose. Declan tightened the screws with a multi-tool from his duty belt, making only the smallest repair necessary. They informed Curtis Van, the motel owner, that Elise was ill and required a welfare check if she failed to answer her phone or door. Curtis, a heavy-set man in a brown work coat with engine oil on one cuff, reacted defensively until Marin made it clear that no one was blaming him for Elise's condition. By then, evening had settled over North Star. Clara sat beside her mother on the bed, her head resting against Elise's arm. The first dose of medicine had been taken. Sonny slept in her lap with his brass sun tag pressed against the paper bag. Huxley lay outside the doorway, facing the open walkway. Snow moved beyond him in thin silver lines. Declan stood at the threshold. He knew staying would make Clara feel safer. He also knew that remaining all night would turn a police officer into a substitute for the support system the family needed. Comfort without structure might help them survive one evening while leaving them just as vulnerable the next. "You have the numbers," he said. Elise nodded. "And the clinic appointment." "I'll go." Declan believed she meant it. Clara opened her eyes. "Will Huxley come back?" Declan looked down at the German shepherd. "Yes," he said, "but tonight you follow Kara's instructions." Clara accepted that distinction. Declan and Marin stepped onto the walkway. Huxley rose slowly and followed. At the stairs, Declan looked back once. The door to room 28 remained open a few inches. Through the gap, he could see Clara asleep against her mother. Sonny curled beneath her hands, and the paper birthday cake standing behind the medicine. Declan had solved the problem presented at the pharmacy. The medicine was delivered. The child was home. The door locked. None of it was enough. What the Bellamys lacked was not kindness from a stranger or one officer willing to return. They lacked people who would still be there when a single act of kindness ran out. The first person to knock on room 28 the next morning was Kira Vaughn. She arrived before 8 with a paper cup of coffee in one hand and her dark red medical backpack over the opposite shoulder. The temperature had fallen overnight, leaving a clear blue sky above Silverpine and a bright crust of frost along the motel railings. Elise was already dressed. The effort had cost her more than she wanted anyone to see. She wore a cream thermal shirt beneath a moss-green cardigan, and her chestnut hair had been pulled into a loose knot at the base of her neck. One hand rested on the back of a chair while she waited for the room to stop tilting. Kira noticed without commenting. "Clinic is expecting us," she said. "I parked close to the stairs. I can walk." "I know." Kira's answer contained neither approval nor doubt. She simply waited while Elise put on her coat. Clara stood near the bed, holding the medicine schedule. She had added small check marks beside the doses Elise had taken during the night. Kara studied the page. "You did this?" Clara nodded. "You did a good job. Today we're going to make sure you don't have to be the only one keeping track." Elise's expression tightened at the words, but she did not argue. Sonny tried to follow them into the cold, tangling his new leash around Clara's boots. The leash was still too long for his small body, and the puppy appeared surprised each time he reached the end of it. "You stay with me," Clara told him. Elise looked back from the doorway. For 1 second, she seemed ready to cancel the appointment. Clara saw it. "I know the numbers," the girl said. "Officer Lowe wrote them down. I can call if something happens." The statement was meant to reassure her mother. Instead, it made Elise's face go still. A 10-year-old should not sound proud of having an emergency plan. Kira touched Elise lightly at the elbow. "Come on," she said. "We'll be back before lunch." The free clinic occupied 2 rooms in the county services building, between a snowplow depot and the public library. There were no polished floors or large waiting areas, only a row of mismatched chairs, a reception desk, and walls painted a calming shade of pale blue. A nurse checked Elise's oxygen level again. The number had risen slightly after the inhaler, but remained low enough to require close observation. A physician confirmed probable pneumonia, reviewed the antibiotic dosage, and added a short course of treatment to reduce the inflammation affecting Elise's asthma. No one promised an easy recovery. Kara arranged follow-up calls and wrote the medication times on a printed chart large enough to hang near the motel bed. She also made Elise repeat the signs that would require emergency care. "Confusion," Elise said. "Blue lips, If I can't speak a full sentence, if the inhaler does not help. And, Elise glanced toward the window. If I faint. Kira nodded. Those are not situations where you wait until morning. By the time they returned to North Star, another car was parked beneath the office overhang. Maribel Sloane stood outside room 28 with a teal folder tucked against her camel-colored coat. Her naturally curled dark hair moved in the wind as she listened to Clara explain why Sonny had not yet learned the difference between sitting and falling backward. Maribel did not begin with forms. She began by asking Elise whether she wanted the door open or closed during their conversation. Open, Elise said after a moment. It was a small choice, but Maribel treated it as if it mattered. They sat around the narrow motel table while Clara colored on the floor beside Sonny. Maribel explained that she worked for the County Family Support Program, not the unit that investigated abuse reports. Her job was to help families stabilize before emergencies became separations. Elise remained guarded. What does that mean in practice? It means food assistance, heating support, medical transportation, and housing applications, Maribel said. It also means deciding now who Clara could stay with for one night if you became too sick to care for her. We don't have anyone. Then we build from there. Maribel did not reach for sympathy. She asked practical questions instead. Had Elise worked recently? Was Clara registered at school? Did they have access to a refrigerator? Had anyone threatened their motel room because of late payment? The questions revealed the shape of their life more clearly than any confession could have. Elise had worked for a small bakery in Milwaukee until the business closed 3 months earlier. She had arrived in Silverpine after hearing about seasonal kitchen jobs at the ski lodges. By the time she became sick, most positions had already been filled. Clara had not yet entered school because Elise lacked a lease, utility bill, and several records packed inside a storage unit 2 counties away. Maribel opened the teal folder. The school cannot require permanent housing before enrolling her. Elise looked doubtful. They told me I needed proof of residence. Someone at the front desk may have told you that. Federal protections say otherwise. Maribel called the district from the motel room. By early afternoon, a woman named Joanna Pike arrived from the Silverpine school system. She was in her mid-40s with a narrow face, a practical gray braid, and snow boots still dusted white around the soles. Joanna served as the district liaison for students without stable housing. She spoke directly to Clara. "You do not need to wait until your mother finds an apartment," Joanna said. "You can begin school next Monday." Clara looked first at Elise rather than answering. "Will they know we live here?" "Only the people who need the information to help with transportation and meals." "Will the other children know?" "Not unless you tell them." Clara considered that carefully. "Can Sonny come?" Joanna smiled. "Sonny would probably eat the homework. He only eats the corners. Then, he definitely has to stay home." It was the first laugh that entered room 28 without being followed by an apology. Over the next several days, help arrived in separate pieces. A county food card came through Maribel's office. A heating assistance application was filed despite the motel arrangement. Joanna delivered school forms and a used backpack that still looked new. Kira called every morning to ask Elise for her temperature and oxygen reading. None of the visits fixed everything. Together, they changed the atmosphere of the room. The table no longer held only unpaid notices and medicine. It held a school calendar, clinic instructions, and a list of housing programs. Clara's books moved from a stack near the wall into the new backpack. The paper birthday cake remained beside the lamp, but it was no longer the only object in the room pointing toward a future. Marin Lowe returned in uniform to inspect the property. She tested the smoke alarms in the rooms occupied by long-term residents. 2 had dead batteries. A third had been removed entirely because steam from a bathroom kept setting it off. The heating unit beneath room 28 rattled, stopped, and restarted with a sharp, metallic knock. Curtis Van followed her along the walkway, his key ring striking his belt with each step. "It's an old system," he said. "Old doesn't mean dangerous. It means it needs inspection," Marin replied. I keep this place running by myself. That does not make the alarm batteries optional." Curtis rubbed one oil-marked hand across his mouth. His irritation seemed rooted less in cruelty than in the fear of someone who knew every official report could become an expense he could not afford. Marin did not repair the alarms herself or accept his promise to handle them later. She completed a formal safety report and sent copies to the fire inspector and motel licensing office. When Declan learned what she had done, he understood the distinction. Quietly replacing batteries might have solved one problem for one night. A report created responsibility that remained after the officers left. Declan continued visiting, though less often than Clara expected and more often than he admitted to himself. He came after his shift wearing a charcoal Henley beneath a dark navy peacoat. Sometimes he carried something from the police station's surplus closet, a desk lamp with a dented shade, a cup filled with sharpened pencils, or a package of lined paper. Once, he brought a bag of puppy food and a shorter leash for Sonny. "These aren't gifts," he told Clara. "What are they?" "Equipment corrections." Clara examined the leash. "Because the other one was too long? Sonny was walking you. He thinks he's bigger than he is, so do a lot of people." Huxley lay near the heater while Clara completed the reading exercises Joanna had left for her. Sonny followed the German Shepherd everywhere, studying each movement with solemn concentration. When Declan told Huxley to sit, Sonny sat a moment later, then slowly toppled sideways. When Huxley lay down, Sonny crouched with his rear still raised. Clara began reading aloud to both dogs. The story was about a boy lost in a forest who followed a stream to find his way home. Clara read carefully, stopping to sound out longer words. Huxley rested his chin on his front paws, amber eyes half closed. "You know he doesn't understand all of that," Declan said. "He understands my voice." Declan could not disagree. Elise sat at the table working through an application Maribel had left. Her cough had become less violent, though it still interrupted her when she spoke for too long. She watched Declan help Clara pronounce the word direction. There was nothing dramatic in the scene. No emergency, no desperate request. That made it more unsettling to Declan than the pharmacy had been. He was beginning to feel useful in ways that could not be entered into a report. One evening, Clara stopped reading and looked at Huxley. "Does he ever get scared?" Declan leaned back in the motel chair. "Yes," Clara frowned, "but he's a police dog. That doesn't remove fear." "What scares him?" "Breaking glass, rooms where he cannot see an exit, losing the scent of someone he is trying to find." Clara placed one hand on Huxley's shoulder. "What does he do when he's scared?" "He keeps working, because you tell him to." "Sometimes." Declan looked at Huxley, remembering searches in thick woods, dark buildings, and winter fields, where the dog had depended on his voice without understanding the danger ahead. Mostly because he knows who he is trying to protect. Clara's hand remained on the dog. Declan continued more quietly. "Being brave doesn't mean fear disappears. It means you know who matters enough to keep moving for." Across the room, Elise stopped writing. Declan had answered Clara, but the words settled somewhere else. Elise looked down at the unfinished assistance form. For days, she had treated every signature as proof that she had failed to keep her family independent. Now she placed her pen on the next line and completed her name. 2 days later, Maribel introduced Elise to Ruth Halprin. Ruth owned Hearth Vapine, the cafe near the town square where cinnamon and baked apples scented the sidewalk each morning. She was 59, broad-shouldered and warm-faced, with pale blue eyes behind tortoise-shell glasses. Her long silver blonde hair was gathered into a loose braid that rested over her left shoulder. She arrived carrying no groceries or donated clothing. Instead, she brought a notebook. "Maribel says you worked as a baker." "For 12 years, Elise said. "What kind? Bread, breakfast pastries, seasonal pies, some decorated cakes." Ruth opened the notebook. "Then I don't want your story. I want your numbers." Elise blinked. "My numbers?" "Cost per batch, preparation time, shelf life, local ingredients if possible. I need a winter item that isn't another cinnamon roll." There was no pity in Ruth's voice. Elise sat straighter. Ruth gave her 3 days to design a recipe, and price it for a small cafe. She made no promise of employment. Elise worked after Clara fell asleep. She calculated flour, butter, and labor costs on motel stationery. She tested flavor combinations mentally because there was no oven available. She settled on an apple ginger hand pie using local orchard preserves, blackstrap molasses, and a small amount of candied citrus. When Ruth returned, Elise presented a complete ingredient sheet, estimated yield and pricing options for both festival and regular service. Ruth, read everything twice. You accounted for waste, 8%. Most people forget. Most bakeries lose money because they think flour is the only thing they're buying. Ruth's mouth curved. The job offer was limited but real. Elise would begin by planning seasonal menus and ordering calculations from the motel for a few paid hours each week. Once Kira and the clinic cleared her for physical work, Ruth would reserve 2 short kitchen shifts. You're not hiring me because Maribel asked, Elise said. No. Or because of Clara? No. Why then? Ruth tapped the cost sheet. Because you know what you're doing. After Ruth left, Elise remained at the table with one hand covering her mouth. She was not crying from relief alone. For the first time since the bakery closed, someone had looked at her and seen a skill before seeing a crisis. Declan heard about the arrangement from Clara during his next visit. Mom has a job that she can do without standing up. A temporary assignment, Elise corrected. A paid temporary assignment, Clara said. Declan congratulated her without making the moment larger than she wanted it to be. Still, as he drove home that night, he realized he was smiling. The realization frightened him. For 6 years, his life had been arranged around things that could be controlled. He worked predictable shifts. He trained Huxley at fixed hours. He returned to a quiet house where every object remained where it had been before his wife died. Nothing surprised him there. Nothing asked him to stay. Room 28 was becoming different. Clara expected him to return. Elise noticed when he was tired. Sonny recognized the sound of his boots on the walkway. Huxley, who remained reserved around most people, now walked toward their door without needing direction. Declan began leaving longer gaps between visits, telling himself boundaries were necessary. Each time, he found reasons to return. The lamp needed a new bulb. Clara's pencils required a sharpener. Huxley needed social exposure around puppies. He knew how weak the explanation sounded. At the end of the week, Clara waited until Elise was speaking with Maribel outside before approaching Declan. She held a sheet of paper folded in half. I made this. Declan opened it. 2 dogs lay in front of a house with smoke curling from the chimney. The smaller dog had enormous feet. The larger one had one ear tilted outward. 3 people stood on the porch. Clara had drawn faces on herself and her mother. The third person was taller and wore a dark coat. His face had been left blank. Why didn't you finish him? Declan asked. Clara looked toward the open door, where Elise's voice drifted in from the walkway. I didn't know if he lived there. Declan folded the drawing along the line Clara had already made and placed it inside his peacoat. He did not answer. That night, he returned to the house he had kept unchanged for 6 years. Huxley walked through the silent rooms and settled near the foot of the stairs. Declan removed his watch, emptied his pockets, and found Clara's picture. For a long time, he stood beside the bed, holding it. Then he placed the drawing on the nightstand, next to a framed photograph he had never moved. The blank-faced man remained on the porch. For the first time, Declan allowed the possibility that the face had not been left unfinished by accident. By the morning of the Snow Lantern Festival, Elise could cross room 28 without reaching for the wall. The improvement was modest enough that another person might not have noticed. Clara did. She noticed that her mother no longer paused halfway between the bed and the table. She noticed the deeper color returning beneath Elise's cheeks, the way her cough had changed from a violent interruption into something smaller and less frequent. She noticed the inhaler remaining untouched for longer stretches. Most of all, Clara noticed the paper from Kira Vaughn taped beside the motel mirror. Short outing approved. Warm clothing, no heavy activity. Rest if breathing changes. Clara had read it 7 times. Maybe we shouldn't go, she said. Elise stood in front of the mirror, fastening the buttons of her dark teal coat. Her chestnut hair had been brushed and pinned back with the small copper, wheat-shaped clip she had worn during her years in the bakery. "Kira said I could," she said for a short time. "We'll make it short. What if it gets colder? We'll go inside. What if you start coughing? I'll sit down. What if?" Elise turned from the mirror. Clara stopped. Her mother did not look annoyed. That would have been easier. Instead, Elise looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with pneumonia. "Clara," she said gently, "I need you to let me be the mother today." The words were soft, but they landed heavily. Clara looked down at Sonny, who was attempting to chew the end of his navy leash. "I am letting you. You've been counting my breath since I put on my coat." "I wasn't counting. You reached 27. Clara's face warmed. Elise crouched carefully and took both of her daughter's hands. "You helped me when I needed you," she said. "You were brave when I was too sick to be. But today, I want you to look at the lights. I want you to play with Sonny. I want you to be 10. Clara studied her mother's face, searching for strain around the mouth, tension near the eyes, anything that might expose the reassurance as a performance. Elise smiled. It was not a perfect smile. That made Clara trust it more. The festival filled Silver Pine's town square with color. Hundreds of paper lanterns hung from wires between the buildings, their painted sides glowing even before sunset. Snow fell in small, lazy flakes, too light to obscure the pale winter sun. Children dragged wooden sleds over the packed paths, while volunteers carried trays of cider between rows of booths. A brass quartet played near the courthouse steps. The trumpet occasionally lost its place, but no one seemed to mind. Ruth Halpern's hearth of a pine booth stood near the center of the square beneath a red awning. A chalkboard menu leaned against one leg of the counter. Apple ginger hand pies recipe by Elise Bellamy. Elise stopped walking. Ruth was arranging pastries inside a glass case, her silver blonde braid resting over one shoulder. She glanced up, saw Elise staring at the sign, and continued working, as if the name had always belonged there. "You made the lettering too large," Elise said when she reached the booth. Ruth adjusted one hand pie by half an inch. "Customers need to know who to blame. You changed the glaze. It needed more citrus. You used more than the costing sheet allowed. I'm the owner. I'm permitted one reckless decision per festival." Elise touched the edge of the chalkboard. No one had written her name on a professional menu since the Milwaukee bakery closed. Ruth did not comment on the emotion gathering in her eyes. She placed a paper bag in Elise's hand instead. Quality control. Elise took a bite. The crust was crisp but tender. The ginger arrived after the apple rather than overpowering it, and the slight bitterness of molasses balanced the candied citrus. Ruth waited. "The filling needs another pinch of salt," Elise said. Ruth smiled. "Then you are definitely getting better." Declan Harrow arrived from the opposite side of the square with Huxley beside him. He was off duty, wearing a dark teal sweater beneath a long navy coat rather than his uniform. Without the badge, radio, and tactical vest, he seemed less imposing, though his height still drew attention in the crowd. The narrow silver streak behind his right temple showed clearly against his dark hair. Huxley wore only his black leather collar. Away from duty, the German shepherd moved with less precision, pausing to examine food dropped in the snow and accepting cautious touches from children after looking to Declan for permission. Sonny saw him first. The puppy barked once, launched forward, and nearly pulled the leash from Clara's hand. "Huxley!" Clara ran after him. For the first few minutes, she remained within arm's reach of Elise. Even while watching Sonny bounce around Huxley's legs, Clara looked back whenever her mother coughed, shifted position, or raised a hand to adjust her scarf. Declan noticed the pattern. Clara was physically present at the festival, but part of her remained in room 28 beside a medicine schedule. "She watches you before she watches anything else," he said quietly. Elise followed Clara's gaze. "I know. She thinks looking away might allow something bad to happen." Elise's fingers tightened around the paper bag. "I taught her that without meaning to. You were sick. I was scared. That too. Marin Lowe approached, carrying 2 cups of hot cider. She was also off-duty, dressed in a cobalt turtleneck and a charcoal jacket, though her posture still had the alertness of someone who automatically located every exit. She handed 1 cup to Elise. "I have been assigned a mission," Marin said. "By whom?" "Your daughter's entire support committee." Elise raised an eyebrow. Marin pointed toward a bench beside the hearth of a pine booth. "You sit, you drink that. I make sure you do not attempt anything heroic. I was planning to stand near my child. You can see the entire square from the bench." Elise glanced toward Clara. The girl was still looking back. Marin lowered her voice. "Go sit somewhere she can find you without guarding you." Elise hesitated, then obeyed. The decision appeared to unsettle Clara more than reassure her. She left Sunny beside Huxley and hurried toward the bench. "Are you tired? A little? Do you need your inhaler?" "No. Should we go back?" "Clara." Elise placed the cider down. "You are not responsible for keeping me alive every second." Clara's expression closed. "I know, no, sweetheart. You know the words. That isn't the same thing." The festival continued around them. Bells, laughter, boots breaking through soft snow, but Clara seemed to hear none of it. Elise took her daughter's face between both hands. "Today I am sitting beside Officer Lowe. Kira approved the outing. I have my medication. If I need help, I will ask for it." Clara swallowed. "And if I don't see you looking at me," Elise continued, "that does not mean you stopped loving me." Behind Clara, Sunny barked. The puppy had launched himself into a drift beside a decorative snowbank. Only his head and the tip of his tail remained visible above the powder. Clara turned despite herself. Huxley stepped into the snow, caught the small fabric handle on Sunny's winter sweater between his teeth, and lifted him free with remarkable care. Sunny landed on all 4 paws. For 1 stunned second he stared at the larger dog. Then he began racing in frantic circles around Huxley, snapping playfully at the sweeping black and tan tail. Huxley looked toward Declan. Declan gave no command. The German shepherd waited until Sunny passed in front of him again, then dropped dramatically onto his side, as though the tiny puppy had knocked him over. Sunny climbed onto Huxley's shoulder in triumph. A laugh escaped Clara. It was brief and startled, as though the sound had been hiding somewhere inside her and slipped out without permission. Huxley rolled partly onto his back. Sunny lost his balance and disappeared into the snow again. Clara laughed louder. The sound drew Elise's hand to her mouth. For months, Clara's laughter had existed only in memory. Even her smiles had been measured, appearing after she confirmed Elise was safe and disappearing at the next cough. Now Clara ran toward the dogs. She did not look back. Declan remained near the edge of the play area, watching her kneel in the snow while Sunny climbed onto her coat. Huxley stood over them with his right ear tilted outward, patient and watchful. A festival volunteer called children toward a snow ring toss. Bright wooden hoops had to be thrown over short posts shaped like pine trees. The prize was a small glass lantern painted with stars. Clara watched from a distance. "You should try," Declan said. "I'm not good at throwing. That is an excellent reason to practice. What if I miss? Then the snow survives." Clara gave him a doubtful look. Declan picked up one of the practice rings and tossed it. The ring struck the side of the nearest post and bounced onto the ground. Clara stared at him. "I may have overestimated my authority over the snow," he said. She entered the line. Her first throw fell short. Her second flew too far. On the third attempt, the ring caught the edge of a post, spun twice, and dropped around it. Clara shouted. She ran to collect the small lantern, holding it above her head for Elise to see. Only after waving it did she realize she had spent several minutes without checking her mother. Elise was still on the bench, still breathing, still smiling. Something inside Clara loosened. She joined the other children for another round without asking permission. At Hearth Vapine, the apple gingerhand pies sold faster than Ruth had expected. People returned to buy additional bags. A ski instructor asked whether the cafe would carry them after the festival. Ruth pointed toward Elise. "Ask the baker." The title made Elise straighten. She answered questions about the preserves, explained why the ginger had been steeped, rather than grated directly into the filling, and suggested reheating the pies in an oven rather than a microwave. No one asked about the motel. No one asked why she looked thin, or why a county support worker had introduced her to Ruth. For 10 minutes, Elise was not a sick mother receiving assistance. She was a baker speaking about her work. Later, when the rush slowed, Declan found her standing beside the edge of the square. The sun had lowered behind the rooftops, turning the snow pale gold. Clara was building a crooked wall of snow with 2 other children. Marin remained within sight, while Huxley and Sonny rested nearby. She stopped looking back, Declan said. Elise watched her daughter press another block of snow into place. I thought I would feel relieved. What do you feel? Left behind for about 3 seconds. Declan smiled faintly, and then relieved. They stood without speaking for a while. The noise of the festival seemed softer from the edge of the square. My husband would have liked this, Elise said. Declan waited. His name was Aaron. He operated industrial cutting machines outside Milwaukee. Her voice remained steady, though her fingers closed around the edge of her scarf. He could repair almost anything except a leaking faucet. For some reason, every faucet he touched became worse. How old was Clara? 7 when he died. Declan looked toward the girl in the snow. Work accident. Elise nodded. A safety sensor failed. The company settled quickly. Everyone told me the payment would protect us. What happened? Rent, medical bills, funeral costs. Months when I couldn't work because Clara woke screaming every night. Elise gave a small, exhausted laugh. Grief has expenses no one includes in the settlement. Declan understood that better than he wanted to. My wife's name was Hannah, he said. Elise turned toward him. She died 6 years ago. Stroke. No warning. I'm sorry. Declan looked across the square rather than at her. Her coat is still hanging beside my front door. Elise said nothing. I tell myself it belongs there because winter comes every year. I haven't changed the curtains in the living room either. They were already faded when she was alive. Do you like them? No. Did she? She hated them. Elise's smile carried no mockery. Then keeping them may not be the tribute you think it is. Declan looked at her. She watched Clara rather than him. Moving forward doesn't erase someone, Elise said. Sometimes grief convinces us that pain is the last proof they mattered, so we protect the pain. A lantern above them turned slowly in the wind. The loyal thing might be different, she continued. It might be refusing to let their death lock every remaining room in your life. Declan's first instinct was to resist the sentence. His second was to remember the blank-faced figure in Clara's drawing. Across the square, Clara fell backward into the snow and laughed before checking whether anyone had seen. Declan felt the key to some long-closed place shift inside him. He did not yet know whether he was ready to turn it. By evening, the festival lanterns glowed fully against the deepening blue sky. At a children's craft table, Clara was given 5 small paper lanterns no larger than her hand. A volunteer invited her to write one thing that made her feel safe on each lantern. Clara bent over the table. On the first, she wrote Mom. On the second, Sonny. On the third, New School. The fourth said Huxley. She paused over the fifth. Declan stood several feet away, speaking with Marin. He saw Clara glance toward him, then cover the lantern with one hand as she wrote. When she finished, she placed all 5 together beneath a string of white lights. Elise read the final lantern first. The police officer who always comes back. Declan stepped closer. The words were uneven and slightly tilted. A small snowflake had been drawn beneath them in blue pencil. He did not tell Clara that police officers could be transferred, reassigned, or called somewhere else. He did not make a promise large enough to become another burden. He only stood beside her as the lanterns brightened. Clara leaned lightly against his arm, watching the 5 small lights tremble in the winter air. For the first time that day, she did not look toward Elise to make sure everything was all right. She already knew where her mother was, and Declan began to understand that Clara had started believing she knew where he would be too. The storm arrived after midnight, long after the last festival lanterns had been taken down. Wind came first, pressing against Silverpine from the northwest and driving loose snow across the roads in white, horizontal sheets. By 1 a.m, tree branches had begun to crack beneath the weight of ice. At 1:17, a pine fell across the power lines near the northern edge of town. North Star Motor Lodge went dark. The heating units beneath the rooms fell silent. The outdoor walkway lights vanished, leaving only the faint red glow of battery-powered exit signs and the shifting beams of flashlights behind curtains. In room 28, Clara woke when the small space heater stopped humming. For several seconds, she lay still beneath the blanket and listened. No heater, no refrigerator, no soft electrical buzz from the lamp beside the paper birthday cake. Only wind scraped across the window and Sunny breathing against her feet. Elise slept beside her, one hand resting near the inhaler on the nightstand. Her breathing had improved during the previous week, though it remained rough enough that Clara had not yet forgotten how to count the pauses between breaths. She counted now. 1, 2, 3. Elise breathed. Clara closed her eyes again. Downstairs, Curtis Van stood in the motel laundry room, wearing his brown work coat over flannel pajamas. A flashlight was clamped between his teeth while he pulled an old portable generator from behind 2 broken dryers. The machine had not been used in more than a year. Dust coated the red metal casing, and the fuel smelled stale when Curtis opened the tank. He knew portable generators belonged outside. He also knew the wind was blowing hard enough to bury the machine within minutes. If the water pipes froze, every occupied room could lose plumbing. If the guests left, some might never return. If the county inspectors arrived after another complaint, North Star might not reopen at all. Curtis looked at the narrow exterior door beside the laundry sink. He opened it several inches. Cold air rushed into the room. "That'll vent it," he muttered. He dragged the generator near the doorway, connected an extension cable, and pulled the starter cord. The engine coughed twice, then came alive with a hard mechanical roar. Lights flickered on in the office. A few heating units restarted. Curtis felt relief before he smelled the exhaust. He opened the door another inch and returned to the office to check the electrical panel. The generator continued running. Its exhaust collected near the ceiling of the laundry room, entered a poorly sealed utility chase, and moved upward through gaps around old ventilation ducts. The gas had no color and no warning smell. It reached the rear rooms first. Clara woke again without knowing why. Her head hurt, not sharply. It felt heavy, as though someone had filled the space behind her eyes with wet sand. Her stomach rolled when she sat up. Sunny was awake now, pacing at the foot of the bed. The puppy whined and scratched at the blanket. "Quiet," Clara whispered. The word came out thick. Elise had not moved. Clara touched her shoulder. "Mom?" Elise's skin felt warm but not fever-hot. Her breathing was shallow and strangely slow. "Mom, wake up." Clara shook her harder. Elise made a faint sound but did not open her eyes. The emergency instructions were taped beside the mirror. Confusion, blue or gray lips, fainting, call emergency services. Clara looked toward the motel phone. The line was dead. Her own phone rested beside the medicine bottles. The battery showed 8%, and the signal flickered between 1 bar and none. She should call emergency services first. Kira had made her repeat that rule. Clara opened the keypad. Her thumb hovered over the number. Then another thought entered with the force of panic. Strangers might arrive before her mother woke, and Clara might not be allowed to stay with her. She pressed Declan's name instead. 3 miles away, Declan Harrow stood in the snow beside a fallen maple tree, while Marin Lowe directed the driver of a county plow around a blocked intersection. Huxley waited in the K9 vehicle with the engine running. Snow accumulated along the dark windows and melted in narrow streams near the roof. Declan's phone vibrated inside his winter patrol coat. He almost missed the call beneath the chainsaw noise. "Clara?" For a moment, there was only static. Then her voice, faint and slurred. "Mom won't wake up right." Declan turned away from the machinery. "What does that mean? She makes noise, but her eyes..." The connection cracked. "Clara, listen to me. Call emergency services now. I called you. I know. You did the right thing by calling someone. Now I need you to open the room door and get into fresh air. My head hurts." His body went cold beneath the winter gear. "Is the power back on?" The heat came back. In the distance behind Clara's voice, Declan heard a low mechanical vibration. "Do you smell smoke?" "No." "Is Sonny awake?" "He keeps crying." Declan was already moving toward the vehicle. "Open the door, Clara. Do not wait for your mother to wake up. Open it now." Something struck the phone on Clara's end. Sonny barked. Then Clara said, "He ran." The call ended. Declan reached the driver's door as Marin saw his expression. "What happened?" "Possible carbon monoxide exposure at North Star. Elise is unresponsive. Clara is symptomatic." Marin did not ask for more. She grabbed her radio. "Dispatch, Units 12 and K93 responding to North Star Motor Lodge. Notify fire and EMS. Possible CO exposure. Multiple occupied rooms. They left the fallen tree to the road crew." The drive took less than 4 minutes, though the storm made every second feel longer. Snow blurred the road beyond the headlights. Declan radioed the motel twice and received no answer. When North Star appeared through the storm, several room lights were glowing weakly. No alarm sounded. Declan parked upwind from the rear section. "Huxley stays in the vehicle," he told Marin. The German Shepherd was already standing inside the compartment, body tense, ears forward. Declan took a compact carbon monoxide detector from the emergency kit attached to his patrol gear. Silverpine had issued the devices after a furnace leak in a rental cabin the previous winter. The detector remained quiet near the parking lot. It began to chirp when Declan approached the stairs. The sound accelerated as he moved toward the rear rooms. "Confirmed reading," he called. Marin activated the cruiser siren in short bursts and began pounding on doors from the clean air side of the walkway. "Police! Everyone outside! Leave your belongings!" Curtains moved. Doors opened. A man stumbled into the cold wearing no shoes. An elderly woman appeared wrapped in a bedspread, confused by the noise. Declan stayed along the open walkway, where the wind provided ventilation, and moved toward room 28. The door stood open. Elise lay near the threshold. Clara had managed to drag her several feet from the bed before losing strength. One of Elise's arms extended onto the outdoor walkway, but most of her body remained inside. Declan's detector screamed. He held his breath, stayed outside the room, and reached across the threshold. Grabbing Elise beneath the shoulders, he pulled her into the open air in one continuous movement. Marin reached them with a blanket. "Elise!" No response. Her pulse was present. Marin rolled her onto her side, then looked inside the room. Clara, empty. A small mitten lay near the bed. Declan stared at it. The pharmacy bag had been knocked from the table. Medicine bottles rested on the carpet. The emergency sheet beside the mirror moved in the wind from the open door. Marin began counting. Evacuees gathered beneath the office overhang. Curtis emerged from the ground floor with his key ring in one hand and soot-dark exhaust staining the air behind him. "What's happening? Where's the generator?" Marin demanded. "Laundry room." "The door's open. Shut it down only if you can reach the switch from outside. Do not enter." Curtis's face emptied as he understood. Fire engines arrived through the storm, red lights washing across the motel walls. Firefighters in breathing apparatus moved toward the laundry room and began checking each occupied unit with gas monitors. Paramedics placed an oxygen mask over Elise's face. Declan remained near room 28, searching the walkway, stairs, and snow below for movement. Marin returned from the crowd. 11 guests accounted for. Elise makes 12. Declan looked at her. Marin's voice changed. "Clara isn't here." The words seemed to erase every other sound. Sonny had escaped through the open door before Clara's call ended. Frightened by the generator's vibration, shouted voices, and the sudden rush of cold air, the puppy had run along the upper walkway toward the rear emergency stairs. Clara had followed. She had made it as far as the first landing before dizziness overcame her. The open air reduced her exposure to the gas, but the landing faced directly into the storm. Snow had already begun collecting against the railing. Clara lay curled on her side, arms wrapped around Sonny beneath her coat. The puppy remained awake only because he could not stop shivering. Declan could not see them from the front walkway. He returned to the K9 vehicle. Huxley struck the compartment door once with a front paw. "Not yet," Declan said. A fire lieutenant approached with a handheld monitor. "Rear exterior path is clear of CO," she said. "We've shut down the generator. Interior rooms are still hot. Search from outside only." Declan opened Huxley's compartment. The German Shepherd jumped down, then looked toward room 28. Declan took Clara's mitten from a clean evidence bag Marin had used to carry it away from the contaminated doorway. He held it beneath Huxley's nose. "Clara." Huxley inhaled deeply. "Find." The dog moved at once. He did not enter the room. He followed the outer walkway toward the rear, nose low near the snow-covered boards. At the corner he paused, where several tracks had already been blurred by wind. Declan kept the long lead loose. Huxley descended the rear path instead of taking the stairs directly. He circled the building, then stopped beneath the emergency landing, his head lifted. Sonny made a weak sound above them. Huxley pulled toward the stairs. Declan followed, boots striking the metal steps. The wind intensified around the exposed landing. Snow spun through the gaps in the railing and collected against Clara's mustard-yellow coat. Huxley reached her first. He sniffed her face, then pushed his nose beneath her hand. Clara did not respond. Sonny raised his head from inside her coat and gave a thin whine. Huxley turned his body toward the wind and lowered himself beside Clara. His black and tan frame blocked part of the blowing snow. He pressed his shoulder along her back and nudged her wrist again. Then he barked, once, twice. The sound cut through the storm. Declan reached the landing. He dropped beside Clara and touched her neck. Pulse, weak but present. "Clara." Her eyelids moved. Declan removed his navy winter coat and wrapped it around her, covering Sonny as well. "I found you," he said. Clara's lips formed a word that did not carry above the wind. Declan leaned closer. "Mom?" "She's outside. Paramedics are with her." Clara's fingers tightened faintly around the puppy. Only then did she allow her eyes to close again. Declan lifted her carefully. Sonny remained tucked against her chest beneath the coat. "Huxley, heel." The German Shepherd rose. His front legs straightened normally. His rear legs did not. For a moment, Huxley remained half lowered on the frozen metal, muscles trembling. The cold had settled into the joints that had already begun troubling him. Declan stopped. Huxley looked up, amber-brown eyes fixed on him. Then the dog forced himself upright. He descended beside Declan, one careful step at a time. At the bottom, firefighters met them with a warming blanket and portable oxygen. Marin ran forward, her face controlled until she saw Clara breathing. Across the parking lot, Elise lay beneath another blanket while paramedics worked over her. Curtis stood near the office wall, staring at the silent generator being carried from the laundry room. Red lights pulsed across the snow. Declan placed Clara onto the stretcher, but kept one hand around hers until a paramedic asked him to move. Huxley stood beside him. The German Shepherd's right ear tilted outward in the familiar way, but his rear leg remained stiff. Snow clung to the dark saddle along his back and melted into the pine-shaped marking on his left side. Declan rested a hand against Huxley's neck. He had spent years thinking of the dog's loyalty through the language of work, training, obedience, command, and response. But no command had taught Huxley how gently to lie beside a frightened child. No drill had told him that Clara belonged beneath his protection. Tonight, Huxley had not searched for a civilian because the job required it. He had searched for someone he knew, someone he had already accepted as his own. The first thing Clara heard was air moving through plastic. A steady hiss filled the space beside her face. It did not sound like the wind at North Star or the heater beneath room 28. This sound was controlled, measured, almost gentle. She opened her eyes. White ceiling tiles passed through her vision before settling into place. A clear tube rested beneath her nose. Adhesive pads pressed against her chest, and a monitor beside the bed drew a green line that rose and fell with every heartbeat. For one confused moment, Clara believed she had awakened in a room where everything had been erased. Then, memory returned in pieces. Sonny running through the open motel door, the metal staircase, snow striking her face, a dark shape lying beside her. Declan's voice. My mom. The words came out dry and weak. A nurse looked up from the computer near the wall. She was a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and a braid tucked beneath a surgical cap. Your mother is being treated nearby. Is she awake? Not yet. Clara pulled at the oxygen tube. The nurse crossed the room quickly but did not grab her hands. You need to keep that in place. Where is she? Her lungs were already under strain before the carbon monoxide exposure. The doctors are giving her oxygen and medication while they monitor her closely. That means she's worse. It means she needs more help than you do right now. Clara turned toward the door. It was closed. Her breathing changed immediately. Am I leaving? You're staying in the hospital until the doctor clears you. No. After. The nurse understood too late what Clara was asking. Before she could answer, someone knocked once and opened the door only halfway. Maribel Sloane stood in the gap. She had exchanged her camel coat for a burgundy-quilted vest, but the teal folder remained tucked beneath one arm. Her dark curls were pulled away from her face, and there was snowmelt on the toes of her boots. Would you like the door open? She asked. Clara nodded. Maribel pushed it wide. The hallway remained visible from the bed. Only then did Clara let the nurse adjust the oxygen tube. Declan waited in a family consultation room near the emergency department, separated from the treatment area by 2 locked doors and a corridor painted pale green. Huxley lay beside his chair. The German Shepherd had been examined at an emergency veterinary clinic shortly after the rescue. He had not inhaled enough carbon monoxide to cause concern because Declan had kept him outside the contaminated zone. His lungs were clear, his temperature normal. His rear trapeze joints were another matter. The veterinarian had found inflammation in both hips and more stiffness in the right hind leg than before the storm. Huxley had been given an anti-inflammatory injection and ordered to rest. Rest was not a command he accepted easily. Each time footsteps approached the room, his head lifted. Declan rested one hand against the back of the dog's neck. You found her, he said. Huxley looked toward the door. Declan knew the dog was not waiting for praise. He was waiting for Clara. Marin entered carrying 2 coffees and a paper bag from the cafeteria. Her uniform shirt had been replaced by a clean one, though a faint gray line remained at the edge of her hair where soot and snowmelt had dried. Elise is still on high-flow oxygen, she said. They're moving her to a monitored respiratory unit. Declan stared at the untouched coffee she placed beside him. Should have taken her in the first night. Marin sat across from him. You recommended it. I accepted the refusal. She had the legal right to refuse. I knew Clara was alone with her. You brought in Kara. You called Maribel. You helped make a plan. Not enough of one. Huxley shifted at Declan's feet, sensing tension in his voice. Marin leaned forward. You don't get to rewrite another person's choices because the outcome scared you. Declan looked at her. That isn't absolution, she continued. It's the truth, he did not answer. The image of Elise lying across the threshold had followed him from the motel. So had Clara's mitten on the floor and the emergency instructions moving in contaminated air. All the safeguards had existed, the phone numbers, the clinic appointment, the written symptoms. And Clara had still called him before emergency services. He had become the number she trusted more than the system designed to save her. That thought did not feel like success. Maribel brought Clara to the family room after the hospital physician cleared her to leave the treatment bay. Clara wore a pale blue sweatshirt supplied by the hospital and gray sweatpants several inches too long. Her skin was still colorless beneath the freckles on her nose. A paper hospital bracelet hung loosely around her wrist. She saw Huxley before she saw Declan. The dog raised his head. Clara crossed the room, stopped in front of him, and seemed unsure whether she was allowed to touch him. Huxley solved the question by leaning forward and resting his head on her knees. Clara folded over him. She did not cry loudly. Her shoulders moved once, then again, while her hands disappeared into the fur along his neck. He stayed, she whispered. Declan looked away. Maribel waited until Clara sat beside Huxley before opening the teal folder. "Your mother needs to remain in the hospital," she said. "The doctors cannot tell us exactly how many days yet." Clara's hand stopped moving. "Where do I go?" "We're going to decide that with you. Not for me, with you." Clara looked toward Declan. He remained seated across the room rather than stepping into the conversation. Maribel continued. "Ruth Halprin has an active county clearance for short-term supportive care. She has a guest room, lives close to your school, and has agreed to care for Sonny when he leaves the veterinary clinic. Will she make me leave Silverpine? No. Will I still see Mom? Every day the hospital allows visitors. What if Mom says no? As soon as she is awake and able to make decisions, we will ask her to approve the plan. Until then, the hospital and county can keep you here safely for a limited time while we wait." Clara considered this. The door to the family room remained open behind Maribel. People passed in the hallway. No one entered without knocking. "What about Officer Harrow?" The question was directed at Maribel, not Declan. "He can visit you if your mother approves," Maribel said. "He cannot make medical or legal decisions for you, because he's not family, because those decisions belong to your mother or an authorized caregiver." Clara pressed her cheek against Huxley's head. Declan expected the answer to hurt her. Instead, she nodded. The boundary seemed to make the arrangement more believable. Ruth arrived before noon carrying Clara's mustard yellow coat, which firefighters had recovered from the motel stairway after the building was declared safe for limited entry. The coat had been dried, though one sleeve still bore a faint dark mark from the metal railing. Ruth did not tell Clara everything would be fine. She held up the coat and said, "Sonny is awake. He is on oxygen, and the veterinarian says his lungs sound better." Clara stood so quickly that Huxley lifted his head. "Can I see him?" "Not until they discharge him. Probably tomorrow." "Is he alone?" "The clinic has 3 nurses and a golden retriever puppy who has already tried to eat the oxygen line twice. I doubt he feels abandoned." Clara's mouth moved toward a smile. Ruth crouched beside her. "My guest room has green walls," she said. "There are books, but most are for adults. You may complain about them. I like green. Then we have one less problem. Do I get a key?" Ruth glanced at Maribel before answering. "You'll have a key when we leave the hospital." The offer carried more weight than a promise of comfort. A key meant Clara could enter. It also meant she would know how to leave. Maribel arranged the temporary care plan while they waited for Elise to regain full awareness. Ruth would handle meals, transportation to school, and Sonny's care. Maribel would remain the formal county contact. Declan was listed only as an approved support person once Elise could consent. No one placed his name in the space marked Guardian. Declan signed nothing. That restraint felt more important than any gesture he could have made. Later that afternoon, Maribel found him alone near the vending machines while Ruth helped Clara choose something to eat. "You're angry with yourself," she said. "I should have pushed harder." "You did push. Not enough." Maribel crossed her arms loosely. "Suppose you had forced an ambulance into that room when Elise was alert, oriented, and legally capable of refusing. She might have been treated sooner. She might also have stopped trusting Kira, me, you, and every service we connected her to. She could have died." Yes, the direct answer caught him off guard. Maribel did not soften it. Respecting someone's rights does not guarantee a safe result. Neither does taking control away from them. Declan looked through the window in the fire door. Clara sat beside Ruth in the family room, eating half a sandwich while Huxley slept near her feet. "So what was I supposed to do?" "What you did. Explain the danger, reduce the risk, build support, return when called. That nearly wasn't enough. Sometimes the work is creating enough safety for someone to make a better decision next time." Declan thought of Clara calling him before emergency services. She trusted the wrong number. "No," Maribel said. She trusted the only number that had proven it would answer. Now we teach her there are others. A nurse found them near sunset. Elise Bellamy is awake. The respiratory unit allowed one short visit. Clara entered wearing a surgical mask, with Ruth and Maribel waiting outside. Declan remained in the family room with Huxley. This was not his moment to occupy. Elise looked smaller beneath the hospital blankets. Oxygen tubing ran beneath her nose, and a monitor tracked the rhythm of her pulse. Her eyes opened slowly when Clara approached. For several seconds, mother and daughter only stared at each other. Then Elise spoke. Her voice was rough and barely audible. "Are you still in Silverpine?" Clara's face collapsed. She reached for her mother's hand. "Yes. They didn't send you away?" "No. I'm staying with Ruth until you come out. She gave me a key." Elise closed her eyes. A tear moved into her hair. She did not ask about the hospital bill. She did not ask whether Harthva Pine had replaced her. She did not ask what had happened to their belongings. She tightened her fingers around Clara's hand. "Sonny, at the animal clinic. He's getting better. And Huxley? He found me." Clara described the rear staircase in broken pieces. She told Elise about the snow against the railing, Sonny beneath her coat and Huxley lying between her body and the wind. She explained how he had nudged her hand and barked until Declan reached them. "He didn't leave," Clara said. Elise looked toward the open hospital door. Beyond it, Maribel stood where she could be seen but not heard. For most of Elise's life, open doors had represented exposure, a landlord inspecting a room, a caseworker arriving with questions, a hospital entrance through which Clara might be taken somewhere else. Now every important door remained open. Clara was still there. Maribel was still there. No one had used Elise's unconsciousness as permission to erase her from her daughter's life. "I was wrong," Elise whispered. Clara frowned. "About what?" "About help." She paused to catch her breath. "I thought letting people in meant losing control. I thought if I needed too much, someone would decide I didn't deserve to be your mother." Clara gripped her hand. Elise looked past her daughter to Maribel. "I'll sign the plan." Maribel stepped into the room, only after Elise nodded. The voluntary agreement was explained line by line. Ruth would provide temporary care. Elise would remain involved in school and medical decisions whenever her condition allowed. Clara would visit regularly. The arrangement could be reviewed and changed as Elise recovered. Elise signed with a trembling hand. It was not surrender. It was the first decision she made after the accident that did not come from fear. The investigation into North Star continued while Elise remained hospitalized. Marin informed Declan that the fire marshal had confirmed the generator was the source of the carbon monoxide. The motel's operating license had been suspended, the rear wing was sealed, and all long-term residents had been relocated through emergency housing programs. Curtis Van had provided fuel receipts, maintenance records, and a full statement. He admitted he knew the generator should have been outside, Marin said. Then why put it inside? Panic. He thought the storm would destroy it. Thought opening the door was enough. That doesn't excuse it. No. Curtis faced safety violations, civil liability, and possible criminal negligence, depending on the prosecutor's review. Cooperation would be considered, but it would not erase the consequences. There would be no simple villain for Silverpine to hate. Only a frightened man who made a dangerous choice and would now have to live with what it nearly cost. 3 days later, Clara stood in the covered courtyard behind the hospital. Ruth held Sonny's leash. The puppy wore a small red sweater and moved more slowly than usual, but his tail began sweeping the moment he saw Clara. She knelt. Sonny pulled free of Ruth's loose grip and ran into Clara's arms. Huxley sat several feet away beside Declan. His right hind leg trembled faintly from the effort of remaining upright. Sonny noticed him. The puppy left Clara, crossed the courtyard, and stopped in front of the German shepherd. Huxley lowered his head. Sonny touched his nose to Huxley's muzzle. Then he circled once and lay against the older dog's front legs, exactly as he had on the pharmacy floor. Huxley shifted carefully and rested his chin across Sonny's back. Clara sat between them. Beyond the glass doors, Elise watched from a wheelchair with Maribel beside her. She was not strong enough to come outside yet, but she lifted one hand against the glass. Clara raised hers in return. She did not ask Ruth when she would be taken away. She did not ask Declan whether he would come back. She did not ask Maribel whether the plan was temporary. For that afternoon, the answers were visible. Her mother was behind one open door. Ruth held the key to another. Declan stood nearby without trying to become something he was not, and two dogs rested against her legs as though no storm had the authority to decide where she belonged. Elise did not return to North Star after leaving the hospital. There was nothing to return to. The motel's rear wing remained sealed behind orange barriers, and the few belongings recovered from room 28 smelled faintly of smoke, damp plaster, and industrial cleaner. Maribel arranged for the Bellamys to move into a transitional apartment 3 blocks from Clara's school and a short walk from Hearth, Vapine. The apartment had 1 bedroom, a narrow kitchen, and a living room with windows facing an alley where snowplows piled dirty banks against a brick wall. To Clara, it looked enormous. She opened every cabinet, counted the electrical outlets, and tested the lock twice. Sonny raced from room to room, his paws sliding across the bare floor until he collided with a cardboard box marked kitchen. Elise stood just inside the doorway. The key Ruth had given Clara during the hospital stay now hung beside a second key on a small metal ring. Maribel placed both in Elise's hand. "This program is temporary," she explained, "but temporary does not mean uncertain. You have 6 months guaranteed, with the option to extend while permanent housing is arranged." Elise closed her fingers around the keys. For years, every key she had carried belonged to a place she might lose. This one came with a written plan, a caseworker's number, and a date for review rather than an eviction threat. Clara chose the corner of the living room for Sonny's bed. She placed her school backpack beside it and set the 5 paper lanterns from the festival on the windowsill. The lantern marked "The Police Officer." Always Comes Back leaned slightly against the glass. Declan noticed it during his first visit but said nothing. He brought no furniture and made no repairs. Maribel had already arranged both through the housing program, and Declan had learned that helping did not always require finding an unfinished task. Instead, he brought Huxley. The German shepherd walked through the apartment slowly, inspecting each doorway while Sonny followed close enough to step on his rear paws. Huxley's right hind leg remained stiff, particularly after climbing stairs, but he tolerated the puppy's attention with his usual patience. When he settled near the living room window, Clara placed Sonny's bed beside him. "They should be together," she said. Declan looked toward Elise. She was unpacking a box of dishes at the kitchen counter. Her movements were still careful but no longer fragile. She did not need to sit between plates. "They can be together," Elise said. "Sonny still sleeps here." Clara understood the boundary and accepted it. In the weeks that followed, Elise rebuilt her strength in increments too small to impress anyone except the people who knew what recovery actually required. At first, she worked from the apartment table. Ruth delivered sales records, ingredient prices, and a list of pastries that had been wasting too much product. Elise redesigned the weekend menu, reduced the number of doughs the kitchen prepared each morning, and developed a cranberry maple scone that used leftover fruit from the cafe's breakfast bowls. Her first paycheck was not large. She held it longer than necessary before depositing it. The money was not charity. It had arrived because her calculations saved the cafe more than they cost. After her doctor approved limited physical work, Elise began 2 short kitchen shifts each week. Ruth refused to let her exceed the agreed hours. "I am capable of deciding when I'm tired," Elise protested one morning. "And I am capable of reading the doctor's letter," Ruth replied. By spring, Elise was working 4 mornings a week and had become the person the other employees consulted when a dough behaved differently in humid weather, or a recipe yielded 2 fewer trays than expected. Clara adjusted to school with less ceremony. She joined the reading club because Joanna Pike mentioned that the library stayed open after classes. She liked sitting near the radiator with a book while Sonny waited at Ruth's apartment, or, later, in the Bellamy's own home. Her teachers learned that Clara rarely volunteered an answer until she was certain it was correct. They also learned that when she finally spoke, she had usually noticed something everyone else missed. She stopped sleeping with the medicine schedule beneath her pillow. For a while, she still woke at night and listened for Elise. Then one morning, Elise realized Clara had slept until the alarm without crossing the apartment to check her breathing. She did not mention it. Some victories were safer when no one asked them to perform. Declan remained present but deliberately ordinary. He attended a school reading event with Marin. He joined Ruth and Elise for a community dinner. He walked Huxley with Clara and Sonny in the park, always returning the puppy's leash to Clara when they reached the apartment. He never arrived late at night without calling. He never used his badge to enter a space where he had not been invited. While Maribel's support case remained open, Declan kept every meeting public, documented, or shared with people already involved in the family's life. The restraint was not distance, it was respect. Elise recognized the difference. Huxley's recovery was less complete. Cold mornings left the German Shepherd slow to rise. During short training exercises, he still obeyed every command, but his turns widened, and he avoided placing full weight on his right rear leg after running. The veterinary evaluation took place in early summer. Declan stood beside the examination table while the veterinarian moved Huxley's hips and knees through a careful range of motion. Huxley remained still, though his breathing changed when pressure was applied near the right joint. He can have a good, active life, the veterinarian said. Walks, light scent work, controlled exercise. But sustained tracking on rough ground or long deployments in cold weather are no longer fair to him. Declan rested his palm on Huxley's shoulder. He's 5. He is also an individual dog, not an average. He wants to work. Huxley wants to be with you. Work is the language you taught him for doing that. The sentence followed Declan home. For years, Huxley's harness had hung beside the front door, close to Hannah's old winter coat. One belonged to a life Declan could not release. The other belonged to a role he was afraid to end. That evening, he placed the harness on the kitchen table. Huxley sat across from him, ears forward. Declan touched the white canine patch. You did everything I asked. Huxley's tail moved once against the floor. Declan had always believed retirement would feel like losing another partner. Instead, he began to understand it as a promise. Huxley would not have to injure himself to prove he was still loved. The next morning, Declan submitted the retirement request. Clara cried when he told her, not because Huxley was hurt, but because she misunderstood what retirement meant. Where will he go? Home with me. All the time. All the time. He doesn't have to leave because he can't work. Declan looked at the child, who had once believed every form of help carried the risk of removal. No, he said. Finishing a job does not mean losing your home. Clara knelt and wrapped her arms around Huxley's neck. The German Shepherd accepted the embrace, then looked toward Declan as if the matter had never been in doubt. Months passed. Elise moved from transitional housing into a modest 2-bedroom apartment under a long-term rental assistance program. Her income from Hearth for Pine covered most of the rent, and the subsidy filled the remaining gap while she continued rebuilding savings. When Maribel closed the emergency support case, she did so at Elise's kitchen table. There was no ceremony. Only signatures, a review of remaining resources, and a final question. Do you feel safe making decisions without us? Elise looked toward Clara, who was reading on the floor while Sonny slept against her legs. Yes, she said. And I know asking for help does not cancel that. 3 weeks later, Declan entered Hearth for Pine without his uniform. Elise was reviewing an order sheet behind the counter. Is this a police matter? She asked. No, a Huxley matter. He's asleep in the car. The heater is on. Then what kind of matter is it? Declan's confidence failed in a way Elise had never seen during a rescue or an emergency. Coffee, he said, with no forms, no case file, and no professional reason. Elise studied him. You came to a cafe to ask whether I wanted coffee. I realized the weakness in the plan after I walked in. She smiled. My shift ends in 20 minutes. Their relationship did not begin with a declaration. It developed through walks after work, shared meals, and conversations in which neither person was required to be grateful. Elise spoke about Aaron without worrying that Declan would treat the memory as competition. Declan eventually removed Hannah's coat from beside the door, not because Elise asked, but because he was ready to fold it carefully and place it in a cedar box upstairs. He changed the curtains too. Hannah would have approved of that part. 1 year after the night at North Star, Silver Pine's Snow Lantern Festival returned. The square looked much as it had before: painted booths, music near the courthouse, light snow turning gold beneath strings of lanterns, but the Bellamys no longer moved through it as people standing outside the town's life. Elise managed Hearth of Pine's main pastry booth. Her apple ginger hand pies remained on the menu, joined by several new recipes carrying her name in smaller, more confident lettering. Clara worked at a table beside the booth, selling cookies shaped like dog paws. A sign explained that the proceeds would purchase carbon monoxide detectors for low-income households and temporary housing units. She corrected anyone who called the devices smoke alarms. They detect a different gas, she explained. You need both. Sonny, now much larger but still awkward, wore his navy and mustard collar and tried to convince customers that one cookie had fallen within his legal territory. At midday, the police department held a small retirement ceremony near the courthouse steps. Huxley stood beside Declan in his black K9 harness. The dog's posture remained proud, though the slight outward angle of his right ear made him appear almost curious about the crowd. Marin spoke briefly about Huxley's years of service. She did not exaggerate his record or reduce him to the night he found Clara. She spoke about discipline, restraint, and the trust required between a handler and a dog who entered uncertainty together. Declan knelt. For the last time, he released the buckles of Huxley's working harness. The familiar weight came away in his hands. A police captain presented a small silver retirement medallion, which Declan attached to a simple black leather collar. The crowd applauded. Huxley looked only at Declan. Clara stood beside Elise, crying openly. When the ceremony ended, she ran forward and knelt in the snow. Does he know he's retired? He knows the harness is off. What does he do now? Declan glanced at Sonny, who was dragging Elise toward them. He goes home. That evening, Elise and Clara came to Declan's house for dinner. The changes were visible before they entered. New curtains framed the living room windows. Hannah's coat no longer hung beside the door, though her photograph remained on the mantel among other pictures rather than standing alone. The guest room upstairs had a narrow bookshelf filled with books Clara had mentioned wanting to read. No one called it her room. No one needed to. Beside Huxley's bed lay a smaller cushion for Sonny. After dinner, Clara found 5 paper lanterns hanging along the porch. One bore Declan's name, one belonged to Elise. The third said Clara. The final 2 carried painted paw prints, one large in black and tan, the other smaller in gold. Snow fell beyond the porch railing, quiet enough that the lantern flames barely moved behind their protective glass. Clara touched the lantern with her name. Can this one stay here next winter? Declan looked at Elise. She did not answer for him. Huxley lay near the steps with Sonny pressed along his side. Neither dog wore working equipment. Neither seemed concerned about what role the other was supposed to serve. Declan turned back to Clara. It isn't a guest lantern anymore. Clara looked up at him. He did not ask her to call him anything new. He did not promise to replace the father she remembered or erase the years that had brought them here. He simply moved her lantern closer to the center, between his and Elise's. 5 small lights glowed against the winter night. No one on the porch had forgotten Aaron or Hannah. No one had forgotten room 28. The poisoned air or the afternoon, Clara placed Sonny on a pharmacy counter, because she believed love was the only thing she had left to trade, but the meaning of belonging had changed. It was no longer something earned by remaining useful. It was not a debt created by rescue. It was a place kept open, season after season, where no one had to surrender what they loved in order to be allowed to stay. Sometimes healing does not begin with a miracle that changes everything at once. It begins with one person who returns, one door that stays open, and one small kindness that asks for nothing in return. Clara once believed she had to give up what she loved in order to save her family. In the end, she learned that real love does not demand a trade. It makes room. It stays, and it helps us stand again without taking away our dignity. May this story remind us to notice the quiet people around us who are carrying more than they say, and to be the kind of person who leaves a light on for them. Share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories of courage, loyalty, and hope. May peace find its way to your home, and may you never doubt that you deserve a place where you can stay.